Hey, welcome back to the Desi Talk Show. This is your host, Dr. Shabana Parvez, and we have today a very special guest, Miss Beena Sarwar. She is a journalist, artist, documentary filmmaker, and a human rights activist. She's the co-founder of the SAPAN, South Asia Peace Action Network. She's the editor of the SAPAN News Network. She also is editor for Aman Asha, which is Hope for Peace. She's had fellowships from the Media Transformation Challenge Fellow this year. She's got the British Chevening Fellowship in the UK, and multiple other accolades. And also, I mentioned a documentary filmmaker. So we're going to get started right away with Miss Beena. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your career, because again, when you say you're in journalism, you're an artist, you make films, you teach, and how do you see all of those paths kind of converging into your focus on peace?
So that's a really good question. I think what happens is when you are doing multiple things, but your underlying values are like human rights, social justice, human dignity, and of course that includes peace, then that's it all does come together. It's all about that. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to beat someone over the head with it that this is what it's about. I mean, you're doing your whatever you're doing, but if you're treating everybody as human beings as equal, and you're viewing everybody as equal human beings, and allowing them dignity as human beings, then I think
That's
it kind of comes together in its own way. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Very well said. Uh, so, as the editor of Aman Ke Asha, what are the some of the most powerful or impactful stories that you've encountered that during that process that can showcase the potential for peace between India and Pakistan,
Well,
for
there
example?
was so much. I mean, Aman Ki Asha is still there. The website is still there, amankiasha.com, and I still update it every now and then. But I'm like, I don't think I'm officially there, but nobody has kicked me out, so I'm kind of
Hmm.
there. But
Hmm.
but it was a really impactful program on the whole. Between 2010 and 2014, when it was like at its peak, when they were having events on the ground as well.
Hmm.
I think one of the most important initiatives was the Heart to Heart campaign, connecting, connecting children who needed medical care to doctors who would provide that care either free of cost, it was done in conjunction with the Rotary clubs of India and Pakistan
Hmm.
and America, because when the Pakistanis wanted to help Indian children, the only way they could do that was send money via Rotary in America, because India and Pakistan don't allow didn't
So that's
allow.
interesting, that triangle,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
indirect way to get India and Pakistan
to get
connected through
money.
Rotary.
Yeah, to get the money.
Uh-huh.
And I think it saved a lot of lives, like little children born with congenital heart defects. And now they're not getting visas these days, since the
Mhm.
last few years. The whole, uh, momentum has gone down. And because what happened was with these children, a lot of them were from very poor families, rural families. So the Jung group, and the news and the GOTV would put out ads saying that we are taking applications of children who need this kind of medical help. And then the Rotary people in Pakistan, they would vet it, they would have it vetted by doctors and stuff. And then they would like take the most deserving, most urgent cases, and take them to India, and the people in India would meet them, would give them hospitality, look after the families who'd come, to a strange
Mhm.
as in same language, same people, but
Right. A
support them that.
different
And
country.
some of those children are now grown up, like in young adults, and their families have been, they've had these experiences. Their families have had these
Mhm.
experiences, so that was really something very, very worthwhile, I think. And another
Mhm.
one I think was really good was the connecting the business people from both sides.
Mhm.
And there were three major conferences that happened. Dividends of peace, and trade for peace. And there's so much willingness and so much both sides wanting to work. But when the visas aren't biggest issue is the visas.
Mhm. Yeah. So visas were not being given from one country to the other.
Now they're not.
Mhm.
Since 2014,
Yeah.
on either side, there has been the media groups have kind of
Mhm.
like stepped
Mhm.
back. They're not pushing for those
Mhm. So
things
how,
anymore.
as you mentioned media groups, how do you envision the role of media in fostering the dialogue and understanding between the communities in India and in Pakistan?
Well, so this was a really good example, Aman Kiasha,
Mhm.
right? Because you had
Mhm.
these two biggest media groups that,
Mhm.
before that, when we talked about peace, it was what they call the Jhola Brigade, people who just,
Right.
like intellectuals and the,
Mhm.
liberals and who had been working like Pakistan India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy and, the South Asians for Human Rights and, like all of that. Um, and the Pakistan India People's Forum people had been visiting each other's countries for joint conventions, at which visas would be given for anywhere up to between 50 and 100 to 300 people from the other side would get a visa to come to, cross the
Mhm.
border. So they would be in different cities every time. One year in
Mhm.
Pakistan in say Karachi, and the next year in India in say Calcutta, and next year in
Mhm.
Pakistan say Lahore, the next year in India say Hyderabad, and so on. So there were several cities where these um joint conventions were held, usually 3 to 5 days across different sectors: education, labor,
Mhm.
um, anti-nuclearization, Kashmir, like taking on really contentious issues. And there was one more, trade unions. I think I already said
Mhm.
labor. But there were
Mhm.
five sectors that got taken up, cross-cutting,
Mhm.
and
Right.
the connections and the when you meet face to face, when you make those connections, some of us, we since then 1994 this has been going on, so that's 30 years now. And
Mhm.
even though the visa stopped being given in 2007, there was one exception in, I think, 2012. After a long gap, India gave the visa, although it was Pakistan's turn, and Pakistan was like, no, we've got terrorism, we can't take the
Mhm.
responsibility, whatever.
Mhm.
But the connections and are still strong, and people are still in touch. And then social media enabled people to stay in touch, and so a lot of and it's basically about also human. It's not just about talking, it's about humanitarian stuff as well. Like one
Right.
of the biggest issues between the two is like the fisher folk on both sides that get picked up
Mhm.
and put into jail, and there's more people from India being jailed in Pakistan. And that's not because Pakistan is more cruel than India or something, but it's because there's more of them coming across, crossing the invisible maritime border between Pakistan and India,
Yeah.
and then the
Basically.
security forces grab them. And
Mhm.
we've been calling for years that instead of arresting them and putting them in jail, let them go, confiscate the
Mhm.
catch,
Mhm.
take whatever money they have, take your whatever, like, but let them go, send them back to their home. But what happens is they get arrested, they'll get caught, they'll be put into prisons. The families don't know whether they've been lost at sea, whether they're alive, dead. They only find out when somebody comes from the other side and says, "Oh, chitti aayi hai, here's there's somebody from your," you know, and sometimes they're there for years. And the sentence, and they're mostly they're charged with illegal border crossing. Then
Mhm.
sometimes if somebody wants to be mean, they'll be charged with espionage. And
Mm.
then
Right.
sometimes they'll die on either side.
Oh,
you know
wow.
they'll
No.
they'll have somebody will have a kidney infection, somebody has a heart issue, somebody, and they'll be put in, they'll be taken to hospital. But then if they die, Shabana, then what happens is that the families again are not informed. Okay,
Mm.
there's this thing that they don't get consular access until after they've served their sentences, which is ridiculous. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so they don't have passports, they don't have visas, they don't have anything, they don't have any paperwork because they've gone out to sea to fish. So
Mhm.
then they get caught and then they're put into jail, and then there's no paperwork. So then they've served their sentence, and sometimes the pre-sentencing time they've spent in jail is counted as the sentence, as the term. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's not. And so then they have to spend extra time, and then now the sentence is up. But they
Mhm.
are the foreign nationals of the other country, so they can't just be released because there's no one to release them to. You can't just let them go. So then they have to be transported. Then they get the consular access. Then some police wala goes to the village and verifies the
Mhm.
identity. And this can take 2-3 months, which is ridiculous in this digital day and age.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
once they finally get the paperwork, the passports, then instead of just being sent across the sea back home, which is like, short distance, they are then carted by bus or train all the way up to Wagah border, 1,000 miles north, in both cases, India or Pakistan. Then they have to cross over the border. Then they have to cross 1,000 miles down south to there. And if the crossing is done in winter, they've never seen winter, these guys. So then local charity organizations, like in Pakistan it's the Idi Foundation, in India I don't know who it is, but then people provide them with blankets and sweaters and food and some money to manage expenses. And so basically it's the humanitarianism of people, of
Hmm.
organizations, that um helps them.
Hmm. That
Yeah.
helps them out. So you founded the SAPAN, which is like South Asia Peace Action Network, to unite peace activists or helping this. What kind of inspired you to found that? And what are your goals that you want to achieve through the network?
So, I mean, I'm one of the co-founders. There's a lot of people who are involved in the founding of
Hmm.
SAPAN, and we
Hmm.
write it like a word, not in all caps.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of us involved. There were about 90 of us at the first meeting that we had, at the end of which we agreed to, launch SAPAN, and it includes some people who are no longer with us today, like Admiral Ramu Ramdas, who was the former head of Indian Navy, like
Hmm.
Dr. Rubina Sehgal, the sociologist from Pakistan. They were there at the very first meeting. Karamat Ali, the legendary sort of labor leader.
Hmm.
And, and they've passed on. Kamla Bhasin, who was not at that first meeting, she was already ill, and she passed away later, but she was very much, one of our inspirations.
Hmm.
So there are many people who are, we're building upon the work that all these people have done, and some of them, like I said, they're, much older, some of them have passed on. But, I think there were so many young people at that first meeting in their 20s, not a whole lot, but quite a few. And since then, so many have joined. They'll reach out, they'll email, through the social media or through the email on the website, southasiapeace.com, or they'll reach out to me directly. They'll find out, or to somebody else, and they'll want to help out, they'll want to volunteer. And what really gives me hope is that a lot of these young people don't have any skin in the game. They don't have any, like, family nostalgia that, oh, my parents were born on that side, and so I want to connect, or I have an ancestral home or land on the other
Hmm.
side, and that's why I want
Hmm.
to connect. A lot of them have no ties across the border. They are just young people in their late teens, early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and they don't believe in all this nonsense that we are seeing. These
Hmm.
political leaders are, so, I'm sorry to say, so juvenile. They are less mature than these young people who are like,
Hmm.
you have to talk, like Mani Shankar Iyer, the Indian congressman. He keeps saying that, dialogue must be uninterrupted and uninterruptible. And so we
Hmm.
have to, take that forward. And I mean, if India and China can trade and talk, if USA and China can trade and talk despite all their political tensions and other stuff, why can't India and Pakistan?
This is true.
And
What
it's holding
what?
the sorry, but it's holding the, and so why Sapan? Because we've been going India, Pakistan, but it's like when one behaves in a more mature way, than the other one, starts acting juvenile, and so they never come on the same page at the same time. The one time they did in 2012, every time they do, something happens, some horrible incident takes place, some violence takes place, due to which the other side says, I'm not talking anymore. So
Hmm.
so we're like, okay, so there's no point, like, going on this, what we call tutu meme. And so we're like,
Hmm.
what, your relationship is holding the development of the entire region back. Our neighbors are
Hmm.
sick of, they look at us, our friends in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Nepal look at us, and they're like, are you serious? Come on, grow up.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
So how does
it's
SAPAN
regional.
differ then, in terms of from the other peace initiatives that have happened in this region? I mean, what kind of unique contribution you think that it can make
Well,
for?
for one thing, it's a collaboration. So
Mhm.
it connects all the other peace organizations who are already there
Mhm.
working. Then
Mhm.
the other thing is this, that it's not just regional; it's also diaspora. It connects the diaspora as well. There's people,
Mhm.
so it's global. So it's
Mhm.
local, it's national, it's global. And then the third thing is that um the it's a collaborative thing, and we don't just focus on peace. Like, we'll take on all issues. We'll take on, you will take on violence in the name of religion. We'll discuss art and activism. We'll talk about music and mystics. We recently
Mm-hmm.
talked about social movements across South Asia. We'll talk about sportswomen challenges and wins. We'll talk about labor rights. We'll talk about the rights of the
Wow.
incarcerated, and education, just like all
Well,
issues.
it's
So,
really
so
quite wide ranging. It's amazing. So it covers all sorts of issues in every walk of life, in every sector, essentially, that you're trying to do. Just like the
yeah,
humanitarian sounds like really just a human interest initiative
yeah,
and
and
social
and
justice.
and and, and to cut across the silos of
Mm.
this is science, this is sports, this is art, like it
Right.
connects everything. So SAPAN News, the media feature syndicated service that grew out, that first we were doing these press releases from South Asia piece, and then I was like, let's just do it as a feature syndicated service. So the slogan for SAPAN News is "It's all connected."
Mm. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, 'cause so you said, like, what are the other stories you think, what is underreported in the legacy, like you mentioned legacy media, other media channels, what are the stories that are underreported that you want to address? Like more human interest stories, or what are some examples?
Well, for
Other
example, SAPAN News is not a news channel. We don't claim to provide breaking. For one thing, we don't have the capacity, and for
right.
another thing, there's enough people doing that. And
Mhm.
we're all volunteer run South Asia Peace and SAPAN News, and now with SAPAN News, we've got some individual, like, people have donated, like about 150 people have donated small amounts of money, and we get news match from the Institute of Nonprofit News and the local independent online news in America, where this is registered. So we're able to make some payments to part-time staffers or people who contribute to us. Whereas until for the first every SAPA News is all entirely voluntary. Um,
Mhm.
so we basically cover and connect South Asia and the diaspora. South Asia Peace does that. And then SAPA News also takes on the Indian Ocean, because it's, as a media syndicated service, we're not saying we're limiting ourselves to only covering South Asia. We'll
Mhm.
take on anything from anywhere in the world, and we link it to South Asia, to the diaspora, to all that. And of course, the Indian Ocean has so many diasporic communities from South Asia.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know if that answered your question, whether we got
That,
to
yeah,
that.
that did. That did. And as you talked about, um, you also tell stories through film because you yourself are an artist and you're a filmmaker. So tell us a little bit about how you incorporate your creativity, your skills into your advocacy, and how do you feel that kind of platform or media can impact social change? Like, what impact does art have on social change?
Oh, I think it's huge. I think without art, without literature, we're like become robots, right? I mean, that's what
Mhm.
the creative imagination, that's what differentiates us from any other, at least from other species or whatever. But and I know, and there's so many scientists who are into music. There's so many artists who are into maths. There's
Mhm.
so much intersection, but at the same time, especially in South Asia, there's a lot of siloing. You know, you know, become an engineer, become a doctor, become a lawyer,
Mhm.
and that's the focus for many parents. And kids are like breaking out of that. They want to be go into acting, they want to go into filmmaking, they want to be creative. And I'm like, let the creativity bloom. And so the creativity is what captures people's imaginations. That's what helps us to look outside the box. That's what
Mhm.
helps us to that's what helps us to have nuance. It's not Things are not
Mhm.
black and white. Everything doesn't have a scientific explanation. There are certain things that have to do with, like, there's a lot of organic things happening, there's a lot of ruhani things happening, there's a lot
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
things that are not,
It's just not
and
black
to
and white.
have the
Yeah.
space. It's not
Mhm.
black and white, and to have the space, to hold the space for different perspectives, rather than saying it is either this or that, you're either with us or, like, even if you
Mhm.
don't agree with someone, to be able to understand. You may not I'll give you a very extreme example,
Mhm.
Shabbat. A very extreme example would be child abuse.
Mhm.
You cannot condone it, you cannot excuse it, you cannot justify it, right?
Mhm.
Not at all. There is no
Mhm.
way. But I would not say that if somebody is caught abusing someone, that they should just be killed. No, because that is not for us to do. Life and death is in the hands of the Almighty. It is not for human beings to take a life, all right?
Mhm.
And to understand that anybody who engages in child abuse was most likely abused themselves as a child. So
Mhm.
there's suffering and pain behind that anger and rage and power play. And you see that I think it's very hard in today's social media world where everything is black and white, cancel culture, outrage culture. um, you know, how can you're justifying this? You say something like this, what I've just said, is like you're justifying it. No, I'm not. I already
Right.
clarified. But nobody,
Yeah.
they don't want to listen because they're so outraged, they're so triggered. So to be able to own your triggers and to have the space and the compassion to stop and think that there is redemption. Human beings are flawed. Everybody has a good and a bad side. And it
Mhm.
depends on which one you feed. It depends on what your circumstances allowed you to develop.
Right.
You know, somebody
Right.
may have, and um, like I think of all these extremist movements that use violence in the name of religion,
Mhm.
that are killing in the name of religion.
Mhm.
And, you know, they're not aliens that descended from outer space. These are human beings. They are from
Mhm.
our societies. They are people who, I mean, you have to acknowledge these are people who are hurt, who feel, who have the same burning need for justice as you and I do.
It's
But
just they have a
we
distorted view of it, or
or they're
the
choosing they're
distorted.
using violence.
They're
They're
using it the
using
wrong
violence
way.
to
They're
they're
using the
using
wrong
violence. They're using the
violence.
path of violence, which is wrong, which is not in religion. They're distorting religion. I wrote a
Mhm.
piece after 9/11, an essay for a book about called Dispatches from a Wounded World, and my
Mhm.
essay was called "The Hijacking of Pakistan," like how religion, how it's been hijacked. Religion has been hijacked. Our
Mhm.
religion does not justify. I mean,
Mhm.
anyway, I don't want to get into
Yes.
theological debate,
Right.
but
But yeah.
point being that no religion justifies or allows violence and killings. There's you can extrapolate that and you can take a very that kind of a view, but if you look at it in context, look at it in its entirety, look at it when it was and why it was, and then you use your reason, your god-given reason, then you will
Mhm.
see that there's not just one black and white way of looking at it. And how can
Right.
you justify violence? So, but what I'm saying is that whether it is whatever religion, I'm not even going to name religions here, but there are violent actions going on in the name of pretty much every religion right now in the world.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the people who are engaging in them are convinced of the righteousness of their cause. They are
Yeah.
convinced that they are right and everybody else is wrong. And I think it's also very important. I think human evolution is to recognize the gray shades and to recognize that everything is not like certain, and maybe
Right.
there's another way of looking at it, and to pause and reflect and think and give
Mhm.
consideration, and
Yes.
to highlight the Rahman and Rahim part, the
Mhm. Yeah,
you
the
know
mercy, the compassion. Like in the case of the child abuser, if they themselves were abused, which is almost 100% of the time, or very, very high,
exactly, yes,
then the cycle of violence will just perpetuate itself if you just
exactly,
treat violence with more violence and hurt them, as opposed to saying, well, let's let's stop that violence and say, why did they get abused? We need to treat the abuser as well so they don't perpetuate it anymore. And I guess it's a way of treating from a place of love and not hate, and
exactly,
thinking about a
compassion,
non-violent solution to things that's
yes,
more inclusive or makes it more of a win-win for everybody and
yes.
not unilateral.
Yeah, and empower children so that they're
Yes.
not told that, if a child come and complains. And by the way, most child abusers are people
Don't
who are
report.
known to the families. They are known to
Hmm.
the
Right.
to the children, and so the child has that trust, and or that the person has a power
Mhm.
over that child, and to empower the children, and
To speak up.
to not shame them, that
Hmm.
you're lying. How can your uncle or
Hmm.
your grandfather or your cousin or your father have done this? You are lying. You must have done
Hmm.
something. you know
Right. Yeah.
so
And that is definitely something in our cultures that's still not um very openly discussed. It's also somewhat taboo. That's a whole other conversation, so we won't go there right now.
Yes,
But
yes.
it's speaking about your artwork and things that you, for example, you tell us a little bit about your documentary film, because this film you did called Milne Do, Let Kashmiris Meet. Tell us a little bit about that. Because it's one of the things that you feel maybe summarizes or encapsulates your mission for peace. Milne Do.
Well, that one does too, but there's others as well. But that one does because that slogan, "Milne Do," is a slogan that we took up at Aman ki Asha as well, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very small documentary done with very little resources. It's just 7 minutes long, and it shows the human suffering that happens in this small, beautiful part of of our countries in Kashmir because
Mm-hmm.
of the intransigence of both of India and Pakistan
Mm-hmm.
to and their refusal to see the Kashmiris as people and to see Kashmir as a piece of real estate, which is
Mm-hmm.
also
Yeah.
something that the Pakistan India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy had identified as that had said that India and Pakistan should not look at it. It's like, don't look at the land, look at the people. And
Hmm.
Kashmir is a
Right. I
very
think that the common
yeah,
theme here is just look
yeah,
at humanity. Just
yeah,
people are people, and see them for themselves as people, and look at it from a place of love
yeah.
first, uh, and understanding. Looking ahead, then, what all you have? What are your aspirations for what you plan to do for work, or how you plan to continue to promote and spread peace initiatives? What are you looking at in the future years?
Well, one of the most recent film I made was about Sri Lanka, and so
Hmm.
people are like, and that's very rare. Like Pakistanis don't go making films about Sri Lanka except if it's a kind of a tourism thing or something. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful country, but the way that I made that film, in collaboration with people on the ground in Sri Lanka, with researchers and consultants on the ground and working with people. um, I think that's the kind of approach that I want to continue to take, of collaboration and like from the ground up and going in without an agenda, um,
Hmm.
into all these areas, and just letting people, giving people a platform, and pulling together stories and sharing them in a universal way. So I teach global journalism at Emerson College this
Hmm.
semester.
Hmm.
Last couple of semesters I've taught that, and then I realized that what I'm doing is global journalism, because global journalism is about a more universal form of journalism. It's like more like connecting the dots, and not just reporting on an event, but going behind the scenes a little bit, and like
Hmm.
privileging the people, and really hearing the people. So that's the
Hmm.
kind of work that I want to continue to do.
Oh, that's incredible. And then your uh, during all of this, all of your work, how do you, as a physician, my interest also is saying, well, how do you keep how do you keep yourself sharp? How do you keep your health, your focus, mental, physical, spiritual health, as you do your work? How do you keep up with it? And also, what is your secret to success? What is your secret recipe, or your secret sauce? What's helped you get where
I
you
mean,
are?
I don't know about success. What is success? People measure success in different ways. And by the way,
Hmm.
my father was a physician as well. And the last documentary I made before this one was more than 10 years ago, just after he passed away, because he led Pakistan's first student movement when he was in medical college in
Mm.
Pakistan, Karachi.
So you
Um,
have the activism in your genes.
Say that again?
So you have the activism in your genes.
Activism in my genes, yeah. Yeah, and my mother is a pioneering teacher trainer. This year they're celebrating 40 years of the organization that she founded, the first teacher
Mhm.
training institution in Pakistan, the Society of Pakistan English Language Teachers. And
Mhm.
that's 40, it completes 40 years this November.
Wow.
So yeah, it's incredible. Um,
Incredible.
so I mean, I don't know about success or whatever, and I don't know about health right now. I'm recovering from a really bad cold, which has lingered
Mhm.
on for almost 2 weeks. But I think I try to. I think over the last couple of years, one of the things that I've taken up is Tai Chi. Last few years, which I really like,
Mhm.
and
That's great.
brings
It's an
brings together a
internal
lot of.
martial art.
Say that again.
It's the internal martial art, the Tai Chi. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
and it's kind of like. it's kind of like be the change. Like instead of pointing fingers at other people and saying you're not doing, you're this, you're not, like what
Mm-hmm.
can you do? What can I do? How to be grounded and strong in your core, but at the same time flexible enough so that when a blow comes at you, instead of going back at it, you duck and you weave and you
Mm-hmm.
use that negative energy against that
Right.
force that's coming at you. So what we're doing at SAPAN, for example, is that we don't react to all the bad things that are happening. Yes, there are many bad things happening. We're all aware, and many of us are doing a lot of, doing whatever we can in our own capacities to counter, to help, to, whatever. But as an organization overall, what we try and do is we try and forge our own narrative rather than reacting. So
Mm-hmm.
so just to keep working on oneself, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
to um, keep keep doors to dialogue open, to
Mm-hmm.
um, not be reactive and not to be combative and not to be shrill and strident, and
Right.
uh, to keep, to be compassionate and open, and you know really model that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we all are human beings, we all fail, we all, but it's just something, it's part of human evolution. Again, you just keep trying.
Right.
You can only do the best that you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You won't
And so,
always.
as a on a daily basis, like you said, how can the average person on a daily basis in their daily lives help contribute to this cause of peace, say between India and Pakistan, or as we have our audience a lot largely is going to be South Asian. So, what
I
can they
think
do in their daily lives?
I think people can just do what they can do, like help out where they can, like help people where they can, bring like use your voice. Don't,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for I'm not saying that we are the only solution, that Sapan and Sapan News are the only solution, but for example, Sapan News is a feature syndicated service, so we send out our features to, like several editors and bloggers and whatever, and we allow it to be used for free. We would love if people would contribute and people would pay us for the work that we do, but we know that a lot of people in South Asia particularly can't afford it, or they're not even paying like journalists for exclusive things, and ours are
Mm-hmm.
syndicated features. But the point is to get things out there, to get the narrative out there. So somebody has an article they want to write or a video they want to make, they can pitch us, and we can, work with them to amplify that, and we try to uplift each
Mm-hmm.
other. Our, like more Sapan South Asia Peace Action Network, which is southasiapeace.com on the net. There's almost 100 organizations that have endorsed the basic founding charter to let people meet, have economic cooperation, uphold human rights and dignity, and cooperate in all areas. So nearly like 99 organizations at last count, and like hundreds of individuals. And this is all without any marketing, this is all volunteer. This is just word of mouth,
If you're just getting started, and it can just only grow from there, we hope.
yeah. And so just
Mhm.
to if it moves you, if you think you can help, if you think you'd like to participate, join us. We've got the charter is there in multiple languages online, Bangla, Sinhala, a lot of different, Punjabi,
Mhm.
Gujarati,
Mhm.
Marathi. So,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
we welcome people to join our discussions, even if they don't speak English. We can arrange for translations. We meet we have public discussions on the last Sunday of every month. Subscribe to the newsletter, suggest to us how we can improve, suggest how we can. Um, what can you do? Like, how can you help?
Mhm.
Mm,
Right.
do you know somebody who can help somebody with a visa? I mean, I know a family which is divided. There's a young woman and her two daughters in Pakistan, in Karachi, and the husband is in India. He had come from Pakistan, from India to Pakistan, and they met and they fell in love and they got married in 2006. And
Mhm.
the only time they meet is when he gets a visa to visit Pakistan, and
Mhm.
his daughters are now in their teens, and their family wants to go live with him. They want to go live with him in India, but they don't get a visa to
Mhm.
even visit. So
Mhm.
in humanity's name, if you know somebody who can help such a family, who can help, like, this is just one family out of so
Mhm.
many, you know.
Right. One out of many stories like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You mentioned a lot about social media, code of ethics and being responsible. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Like what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that, thank you for asking that. And I really would love to have a conversation with you about your practice and your stuff as well sometime. But
Hmm.
and how we can work together. But so social media over the last 10, 15 years particularly has, I think, taken the world. We've gained a lot from it as well, connections and
Hmm.
all that, but we've also lost a lot because it has um, uh, privileged the reptilian part of our brain and not the one that's up here.
Hmm.
What's it called?
Not the
The frontal
executive, yeah,
lobe. You know,
yeah.
so what happens is that something is shared on social media, you get triggered, and the triggers of fear, anxiety, outrage, and all that. Like boom, 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 outrage, 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 react, 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 share, share, share. So that really multiplies it, and I think that has really taken us backwards. At the same time, of course, we use it for our work as well, social media.
Hmm.
But so we came across this idea that everybody using social media is, in a way, they're like para journalists, many people, because
Hmm. Yes.
like paralegals, paramedics, and para, this other para whatever, paramilitary, and but they
Hmm.
all these other para
Hmm.
outfits get training. They have to adhere to a code of ethics. They have to,
Right.
like there's some supervision. They're not just like
Yeah.
out there like boom, 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 boom. So
Right.
we put together this code of ethics, which has just got a few points which you can. It's like a checklist, and the journalists who have read it, senior editors who have read it, they find that they said that's very useful for them as well, because e- even if you're a trained journalist, when you're interacting on social media, I've seen many trained journalists even like be reactive, be
Hmm.
combative,
Yes.
because which you don't normally do in your professional or personal life. Social
Hmm.
media, like, it's just opened a kind of the floodgates to basically behaving badly.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
There will
think
be better.
basic civility, decency, manners, basic disrespect to somebody else, to not just like start to like calling names and like
Mhm.
anyway, I don't even want to get it. So this is
Humanity and decency is like of has
so
lost
so
sometimes.
if you sign on to this code of ethics, so the idea is that if you sign on to this code of ethics, then maybe we can get a widget or something, and people can put it on their
Mhm.
social media that I have signed the
They
social
have adhered
I
to this.
pledge to abide by this code of ethics,
That's
and
brilliant.
do
Yeah.
you, and here's how you can do it. But right now it's a Google Doc which I shared with you, and you're welcome to share it
Mhm.
with your viewers.
Absolutely.
And it's we'll make it public. I mean, I think we're about to make it public soon anyway, but it can be a work in progress, and then people who have signed on to it can have their names on the website. And it could be
Mhm.
according to country, it can be according to profession, it can be. And if millions and millions of people sign on to this code of ethics, social media code of ethics, maybe it'll give people pause to think. Maybe it'll give some kind of a breathing space in this very, very toxic social
Yeah.
media online environment.
Yeah. And so in transitioning from that, since the younger generation is primarily the user of social media to a very large extent, what kind of advice, so as we close up, what kind of advice would you give to the young generation nowadays?
So
What young journalists and activists, what is your advice to them as they pursue peace or
I would say, actually, no, it's not just the younger generation. It's
Mhm.
all the grandparents and aunties and uncles on Facebook and WhatsApp that
That's
are
true.
going
They're
boom,
very
boom, boom,
reactive as
boom, boom.
well.
Forward,
Hmm.
forward, 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 forward. Outrage, outrage. It's not just the younger generation. Yes, but a lot of younger generation they've gone away from those kind of platforms and doing that. I think we can learn a lot from the younger generation. They are showing us the way of how to behave, actually, in many cases. So I would say that this is not just for youngers or older. It's for anybody. And I would say that, who am I to give advice? I'm still learning. I'm still trying to
Hmm.
improve myself. And yes, I feel like I've got a handle on some things, but then I slip up all the time. You know,
Hmm.
um, I
So
think that
those who are aspiring to be journalists and activists, what do you advise them?
I think that to be open and to be humble and to be curious are three key
Hmm.
things.
Yeah,
Um, don't think that you know it all ever. You always keep
that's a good
learning.
piece of advice. You never
Yeah,
know it all.
always
No.
keep learning. I learn all the time. from so many, like this code of ethics, so many young people have contributed to it, so many senior people have contributed to it,
Mhm.
and shared, like their thoughts on it, and to make it better and stronger. um, so I think, and the thing that I tell my journalism students and my reporters and people is, like, anything that you write about or report about, look at the process behind the event, look at the context, and take the long view.
Right.
So
Yeah. It reminds me actually of a verse of the Quran that in Surah Hujurat that says, verify. Like when you hear some rumor or something, verify it a little bit, check it.
exactly, absolutely,
Verify it before you just start spreading it. And that
exactly.
is unfortunately forgotten in
Yes,
today's world.
and
Anyway,
as the biblical say, who among you will cast the first stone? Stoning to
first
death is
stone.
not an Islamic punishment, and
Yeah.
yet it is yet, a lot of punishments are not Islamic punishments, and they're
Hmm.
uh, being meted out,
Misrepresented as it should. Yeah. Very
misrepresented.
unfortunate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there's still a lot more work to do, but thank you so much for all your efforts, and it's been fascinating talking to you and inspiring. Really, to all the your passion is very clear in this, and it's really been inspiring to speak to you. Thank you so much, and we hope, like you mentioned, SoutheastAsiaPeace.com
No,
and
South Asia Peace, not Southeast.
South
We are not
Asia, South
Southeast.
Asia
We are
Peace,
South Asia Peace.
SouthAsiaPeace.com. We'll put that. We'll
South
try to
Asia
put that
Peace.
link on our
Yeah,
website.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
SouthAsiaPeace.com and SAPANnews.com.
SAPANnews.com.
And
So we'll put our
and
links
thank
on
you
the.
so much for giving me an opportunity to talk to you. And I would love to talk another
Yeah,
time.
definitely. We'll